Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Red Eagle Politics. We're doing a brand new live stream today. Make sure you guys like the stream down below. Make sure you guys subscribe if you're new. Make sure you hit the bell if you are subscribed. We have a lot to talk about tonight on the show. We haven't been live since, I believe, Wednesday. And a lot has happened since then over the past weekend, mainly pertaining to 2024. We covered the Anheuser-Busch stuff in yesterday's video, which again, we're going to try to mix in some non-electoral content as much as possible where we can grow the coalition. We're going to be doing that. But furthermore, we are going to be touching mainly on 2024 down ballot tonight. It's the down ballot roundup. Haven't spent a lot of time on it, but we have Mark Robinson, of all people, the popular lieutenant governor on the Republican side in the state of North Carolina. He has announced his run for the governorship. We're going to be touching on it. You have a lot of bad faith actors trying to shut this down, saying he's the worst candidate you could run. They're comparing him to Doug Mastriano. They don't have any ammunition on this guy. They really don't. In fact, they have ammunition that's already been used. It didn't work. They're going to try to use it against him again at the state level. No, he's not guaranteed to win. He's not. North Carolina does like to split their tickets. However, I'm going to make the case in this stream and probably in a video tomorrow as well that he is the strongest candidate that Republicans can put up to go up against Josh Stein, who is going to be the Democrat nominee. And we'll talk about the primary and why we need to make sure that it's not divisive as possible, and the fact that everybody can rally behind one candidate as soon and as quickly as they possibly can, and the benefits behind that. But also, we're going to be talking about Ohio's Senate race. Bernie Moreno, who is a car salesman, a car dealer, and he ran for Senate last time around, didn't do so well. He dropped out. He kind of helped J.D. Vance in doing so and through his support behind him. And now he is running for U.S. Senate again in 2024. We're going to be talking about that, the pros and cons to his candidacy, but also some recent comments that he made where he is being accused of floating reparations for white people, and that's their attack line, which, again, disingenuous. Honestly, there are criticisms that I have with Moreno, and we'll talk about it, actually including reparations in general, which he backed and supported a couple of years ago, back in 2020 during the whole race riots. He was the one going out there. He was talking about reparations, among other things, but we'll be covering that. And also Donald Trump, with the state of Florida, his new home state, going on the offensive against the state of Florida, and Ron DeSantis using a lot of different websites, picking certain metrics, saying the state's a horrible place to live and the economy's in shambles, whatever. We're going to be touching on that. It is interesting that Trump decided to go out and go all out on the state of Florida and attack DeSantis with some of the metrics, which some are more legitimate than others, and we'll talk about why. And we'll talk about what the strategy should be in terms of navigating DeSantis's governorship in Florida and how Trump should be attacking it if he wants to maximize his support during the primary without burning too many bridges in the state. That's still going to be a state he's going to need in 2024. I think he'd win it regardless. He could come out and say that the state is horrible, it's the worst place to live, still do well. And he has a lot of endorsements that he's touting from Florida. And I think that we should be covering that as well because of the fact that he's outmanning DeSantis with the political power in DeSantis's home state. Even his representative that represents the district that he used to represent in Congress coming out and supporting Donald Trump. Trump is doing everything he can to flex his endorsement power, flex that muscle, go out there on the offensive, use it against Ron DeSantis. We'll be covering that as well. That's kind of the preview. We'll get to channel updates before we jump in with the Mark Robinson stuff, which is the biggest news over the past couple of days. He released a wonderful ad, and we're going to play it. Let me know if the audio works, by the way, but we're going to get to channel updates. So this week, we'll put a video out tomorrow on Monday, presumably about the Mark Robinson stuff, because this is hot right now. And then we'll do another stream on Tuesday. Wednesday, I want to do a video, possibly one about Biden's chances in 2024. What is the strategy going to be to defeat Joe Biden? How is he going to go down? How is he going to be a one-term president? How are we going to make that happen? We're going to be talking about that. And on Thursday, it's the draft night, so we're not going to stream late. I would like to stream regardless. I'd like to do a stream, maybe a very rare afternoon stream on this channel. Maybe we could, I don't know, play some political games or something and just talk about things that are going on. We don't even know what the news is going to be by then, but that's basically what's going to happen on the channel. I'm going to stick to this Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday stream schedule. I think it works great. I think going live around 10 p.m. is ideal. 11 p.m. people say sometimes it's a little too late, and it is. And I think that if we go live too early, especially when a lot of other streamers are streaming, I don't think that's really ideal either. So we'll be talking about that as well. But furthermore, Mark Robinson, this is the most important news story of the day, arguably, because he released his ad. He's being attacked from a lot of these neocons who were completely fine with him a couple of months ago. But now that he's running for governor, all hell's breaking loose for Mark Robinson in the eyes of a lot of these people. Very disingenuous attacks, because what they're saying is that Mark Robinson can't win in North Carolina, which he already did. He won in 2020. He won the lieutenant governorship. He outperformed Donald Trump, despite being outspent, having a lot of his controversies front and center on the TV. But what did he do? He went out there. He talked about the issues that mattered to people. He talked about benefiting the state. And as a result, it paid off for him. He won by 3 and change, I believe. And he's now running for governor. So he's already a proven overperformer statewide. And a lot of people are going to say, just because you do well in one statewide election doesn't mean you're going to win another. It's harder for Republicans to win the governorship in North Carolina. They're right. They're right about that 100%. But there's a major problem and flaw within that reasoning that does apply to this. Because, yeah, Dan Forrest won by 5, the lieutenant governorship in 2016. And then 2020, he lost by like 3 or 4. Against Roy Cooper. I don't know the exact margin, but he lost by a lean margin, which was closer than I think a lot of people expected. But Roy Cooper was a strong incumbent. Josh Stein, I don't really know if he's really all that strong. He vastly outspent his opponent to win by like 1,000 votes. Not like actually, but like it was like a very razor thin margin back in 2020. And he went up against somebody who was a virtual no-name. He was an incumbent. He was able to get by, but he's not some like electoral juggernaut either. And then Mark Robinson is somebody whose political clout has gone up a lot since then when he first ran. And he's had like these controversies, one could say. He's had these skeletons in his closet. They say, oh, he put these like offensive Facebook comments from 5 years ago, which, by the way, he kind of sidestepped and sort of like apologized for, and then got a lot of endorsements from groups that he allegedly was criticizing. Whatever, it's not likely going to impact this election very much. And if they focus on that instead of the issues, while Mark Robinson is focusing on the issues that matter, then their taglines are going to fall flat. It's not going to work. So I'm going to play this ad without further ado. This is, I think, just part of it. But, you know, it's a very good ad all around, and I'm going to play it. Make sure you guys let me know. If you tell me you can't hear anything, because I'm trying to stream the audio, if you can't hear anything, let me know. But you guys should be able to hear this. So without further ado, I'm going to play this ad.
University. My mom took her 5th grade education and walked across the street and got a job at a university. She cleaned up after other people's children to provide for her own. She told me to dream. She told me with faith, hard work, I could achieve anything. She was so right.
History made in the Tar Heel state last night.
Who exactly is Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson?
I'm the majority. I do. Stand before you today as the first Black lieutenant governor of North Carolina. Served in the military. I've worked in furniture plants. I've been a general manager for a restaurant chain. And I owned a small business with my wife. As a factory worker, I made good money. Till NAFTA hit. I lost my job not once, but twice. My wife and I faced these tough times as we worked to raise a young family with 2 wonderful children. Like so many of you, we know the gnawing feeling you get from worrying about money, how it keeps you up at night as your children sleep. I've lost my car, my home, and was forced into bankruptcy. Like you, I don't need a politician to tell me what to be worried about. It's obvious. We know the price of gas and groceries and childcare is outrageous. We know too many children can't read on a grade level, that they've been failed by an education bureaucracy that's leaving them unprepared for life once they graduate. And sadly, we know our teachers aren't respected and aren't treated or paid as the professionals that they are. We know that shuttered factories like the ones I've worked for have left scars all over the small towns of North Carolina. We also know that our police departments are struggling, that they can't fill their ranks because we are demonizing the men and women in blue. North Carolina doesn't need more slick politicians who use work boots and Carhartt jackets as props in TV ads. They're just pretending to be one of us.
So this is not the whole video. That part is true. But this is what you can find on Twitter. There's more to it. Obviously, it's like a 5-minute video. You guys can watch the rest if you guys want. But what it shows is that this is how you run a campaign that's effective and that can win. Because he's going out there. He's not making his entire personality about Trump or overdoing the 2020 stuff or focusing on like, oh, even like Biden, the whole let's go Brandon thing. He's not running a gimmicky campaign. He's talking about his life story. He's talking about issues that actually matter to voters. And even though he is like known for being really socially conservative, he's very base, he's very good in a wide array of issues. He knows what to focus on. He knows how to run he's already running a general election campaign. Before the primary has even started, he's going to let his record speak for itself in the primary. He's likely going to clear the field easily, and he is going to win it. And when it comes to the general election, if this is what he's focusing on, and down the stretch, this is what it's about. He has, he has like good stature. He's people call him Big Rob. He's, kind of a big guy. Not like super tall, but he's got an interesting like physique. And on top of it, he's got good optics. He has like a really interesting like baritone, like black preacher style voice that a lot of people resonate with. It's a very resonant voice. And that's when he does his like speeches. And when he says things that are a little controversial, like optically speaking, playing it in the ads, it still makes him look lovable. He's like the lovable black preacher when he's being as controversial as possible. And then when he's talking about the issues that matter, he's going out there and he's talking about trade even at the state level. Like he's talking about how politicians are leaving people behind. He talked about NAFTA in the ad. He talked about how, he was a factory worker. He's reaching out to other groups that don't typically vote Republican. He's like throwing red meat to the teachers or whatever, which, we could have that discussion. But either way, a very effective ad. And if this is how he runs his campaign, he shouldn't have a problem winning. And he's got connections that a lot of Republicans don't who aren't statewide officials. He's got a lot of people in the party that are going to back him every step of the way. The North Carolina Republican Party doesn't typically stab their own in the back. And Ted Budd, he was the America First choice in the Senate primary back in 2022. They rallied behind him. He had no problem winning. Mark Robinson is a little bit more of a character. Like I said, he has controversies in his past. That's technically true. But they were front and center in 2020. They did not affect him, especially because that's a down ballot race. Democrats typically do better in those in North Carolina. He still outperformed well enough to win. And you look at the other candidates in the race on the Republican side. You have lazy campaigner Mark Walker. He's not viable. He is pending an announcement. He should not be in this race. And then you have state treasurer who is running as well. Dale something. I'm not exactly sure. It's, let me see. Dale, the treasurer. Dale Folwell. He's running. And he has been another statewide overperformer. That is true. But at the same time, he has faced very minimal opposition. Mark Robinson was outspent down the stretch in 2020, and he went out there and he won. And then this guy outspends his opponent by a lot, and he only outperforms Robinson by like a couple of points or so. He's a good treasurer from what I can tell, but I don't think this is really his turn to like become governor. And if he gets in this race, it's going to cause more of it. If she's in the race, he should probably step aside because it's just causing more unnecessary divide that we just don't need in a party. Because when you have this much divide in a party, when you have a primary that's so divisive and torn apart, you have like this electoral tribalism that kicks in. And as a result, you see candidates typically do worse than a general because then they have to waste time getting everybody on board. And that's one of the reasons why I don't want Ron DeSantis to jump in the Republican primary. And it's very important that he ideally wouldn't, or if he does, he just goes out there and just bombs, because you have to rally behind the nominee from the get-go. Democrats did this across the board in 2022. That is why they did not really have that much of a problem winning. Republicans, on the other hand, they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it to save their lives, and you lost a lot of very narrow elections nationwide because of it that otherwise you probably should have gone out there and won. And that's one of the reasons. Spending is another reason. And all of those problems, mechanics, they don't typically apply to the Mark Robinson scenario. People are like, well, haven't you learned your lesson? These smug, arrogant individuals. You haven't learned your lesson from 2022. If you want a candidate who's to the right of Mitt Romney running in any right-leaning swing state, it's not eluctable, even though the guy's already won statewide. Which, again, I'm not saying he's guaranteed to win, because this is a race that's going to be close. It's going to be competitive, no matter who the Republicans put up, because of the fact that North Carolina down ballot does vote for Democrat governors. I don't know why. I think it's ticket splitting in Appalachia. Mark Robinson maybe being a little bit more polarizing could help him in a state like North Carolina, one could say. But still, these people that are like, haven't you learned your lesson? Okay, let's even just say that. A lot of the people that they point to losing as reasons why we need to cuck on the candidate type of nominations in these swing states, a lot of them were outsiders. They never ran for politics before. Herschel Walker, never. And again, he was a generic Republican. He ran as a generic Republican. The problem with him wasn't he had ties to Trump. Burt Jones had ties to Trump, the lieutenant governor candidate. He won by 5. The problem with Herschel Walker was he did not know how to be a good public speaker to save his life. And he had a lot of scandals and skeletons in his closet. The whole paid for abortion thing, whatever, that may not have happened from all we know. Mark Robinson actually did that. And it's not even affecting him, though, because he admitted it. And it was with his wife. And this was back in the 1980s. And he says that he regrets it. And he can use that as ammunition to flip the script on the Democrats on the issue of abortion. Because the other critique that they would use on Robinson is like, oh, he's too the abortion issue. Dems are going to be fired up about that. And his stance is no different than Falwell's stance. I mean, they're really not different. But if Robinson can flip the script and then talk about other issues, it should help him. And he can win this race. And he should win this race. And if he keeps that messaging up, I don't think he's losing this race. I really don't. And we'll see. But the fact that you had a lot of people that were outsiders, like I said, Lake, Walker, Oz, a lot of people that maybe didn't know how to run campaigns before, haven't been proven statewide. The only one that was Laxalt. And again, you could thank a snowstorm for him going down, among other things. But that is a key part of it, is the whole, Republicans didn't utilize early in mails in the state of Nevada, but they typically do a better job of that in a state like North Carolina. So it shouldn't really matter. It shouldn't really affect Robinson. And Robinson doesn't overdo making his whole personality about Trump while bringing no other substance to the table like some candidates do. He doesn't overdo the whole 2020 stuff like a lot of candidates do. What he does is he talks about the issues that matter. That doesn't mean he's weak on election integrity. That doesn't mean that he doesn't support Donald Trump, but he brings a lot of other things to the table. While he can expand the coalition, there's a chance he could outperform the Republican nominee at the presidential level, depending on how he runs his campaign. And he is well liked by independents. And this is something that a lot of people have not really touched based on. And there were some polls about this that have been conducted. Robinson has been defeating Stein in nearly every single poll. And he's known for his antics. He's known for being controversial, pushing the envelope, just being really socially conservative. But I don't think if Democrats say, oh, he believes there's 2 agendas, he can't win. You have to be that much of a loser if that's going to be your mindset on the Republican side. And it's ironic because a lot of those people also support DeSantis for president over Trump. And DeSantis has been known for engaging in the culture war. Now Trump's like hitting him from the left on it even, which I don't really think is a very good thing, by the way. But nevertheless, what I will say is that Robinson is eluctable. To say that he's not, or to compare him to other candidates who may have lost in 2022, who would have won in North Carolina, by the way, is extremely disingenuous. And they know it, because it's not about stopping, Mark Robinson from getting the nomination because they're worried he's not going to win the race. It's more that they're trying to stop Mark Robinson from getting the nomination because they know that he would be an effective governor, and they just want to lie down. They want to cave. They want the left to like them, et cetera, whatever. That's all it comes down to. It's really not about anything else. And the guy's got decent name recognition. He's already polling almost at 50% among the independent voters that, these candidates can't win. Like, that's not how these things work. It's not how these things work. And they know it. Deep down, they know it. And they will have no choice but to bite the bullet and come around, because he's going to get the nomination. He's polling very well in the primary. Even when they throw Tom Tillis in the mix, who's a sitting senator, he still gets 60% of the vote in the primary. People love him. Republicans love him. Independents love him. There are Democrats who love him. And I don't really buy the whole, nominating like black candidates helps us among the black vote. But if you look at 2020 in some of those northeastern counties, he did vastly outperform Donald Trump in a lot of them, which speaks volumes, especially because he was going up against who I believe was a black Democrat nominee for the Democrat side for lieutenant governor. And notice how Robinson, in the ad, it kind of said, he made history, whatever, when he became lieutenant governor. But his whole ad is not about race baiting. He's not going out there and saying, vote for me because I'm this ethnicity, or vote for me because I'm a woman, like a lot of these people on the right typically do. People like Kristi Noem always playing the woman card. Tim Scott, for example, which again, it's ironic. The same people that say you criticize Tim Scott, you must be racist. They're the people that are saying, we don't want Mark Robinson to get the Republican nomination for governor, which again, that's obviously not because of racism or whatever leftist tagline they want to use, but it shows that they just care about acting like liberals the whole time. That's why they go out there, and that is why they will go and call you a racist for trashing Tim Scott, because they have the same immoral framework that the left operates under. And it speaks volumes. They're no different from the left in many cases. But somebody like Mark Robinson, he cuts directly through that, and he's still popular, and he's awesome, and everybody agrees. And that is why he's probably more likely than not going to be the next governor of the state of North Carolina. It's not a cakewalk. It's going to be competitive regardless. We know that North Carolina is a close state. They like their Democrat governors. And even if Robinson is the nominee and happens to go down, Republicans are going to be gaining a lot more seats in the state legislature given recent maps. So they're not whatever happens, the Democrat governor is essentially going to be a figurehead, a lame duck. But if Mark Robinson wins, which I still believe to be what will happen, he would go out there and have that supermajority state legislature. He would be a lot more effective than your most effective Republican governor nationwide now. And he would arguably be the instant front runner for either 2028 or 2032, because if he wins in 2024, because he would be able to be that guy. He would go out there and he would govern the state, and he would likely be popular, and he would be somebody who pushes the envelope and does so very effectively and uses his, political skills to his advantage. And that's my take on it, really. I think we've pretty much covered everything about the Mark Robinson thing. I do believe that looking at this whole big picture, it does seem as if he is the right choice. And the people that are too worried about eluctability, they're never going to save this country, because they can't even, it's not even like a minor risk, because this is the most proven product, and you're just spitting in his face because, I'm worried because he's slightly controversial. And the same thing goes for a lot of states. They want Matt Dolan to be the nominee in Ohio. That is how you lose the state of Ohio, by nominating Matt Dolan. You know why? Because nobody likes Matt Dolan. even though, like, let's say that maybe there's a chance that a liberal Republican could get elected in the Rust Belt. I know they could, hypothetically, Rob Portman, under the right circumstances, going up against zero opposition. Like, yeah, I get it. But he was also somewhat likable compared to somebody like Matt Dolan, who nobody likes the guy. He's just not a likable guy. He changed the Cleveland Indians team name to the Guardians. He calls himself a Republican. He's pro free trade. Like, that's worse in the state of Ohio. If you are like anti-Trump and you are pro free trade, you're not going to win statewide very easily. You're just not. And everybody knows it. It speaks volumes just looking at these trends in the state, comparing 2008, 2012, even 2004, when Bush like won the state. It still was voting like to the left of the national environment, or just like maybe slightly to the right of it. And Trump comes along and the state is basically solid red. It's the next Missouri. It used to be a swing state. Now it's moving towards safe red status. If you want to lose to Sherrod Brown, you nominate Matt Dolan. You do. Because the guy does not resonate, and you will see a lot of voters who would vote for Trump, or let's say DeSantis gets the nominee, they'll even vote for DeSantis. But down ballot, they might split their tickets, because if you run somebody who is pro-free trade, Sherrod Brown will make his entire campaign about trade. That is all he will hammer home. He, and all of his past liberal stances, his basically being Ohio's Elizabeth Warren / Bernie Sanders, that's all out of the window, because he'll put on the hard hat. He'll go to Northeast Ohio and he'll go trade, 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 trade. I'm your senator. I don't partake in the culture war. I'm not voting for, I'm voting for pro-union policies. I'm pro-worker. Okay, that's all he has to do then. That's all he has to do. And I'm not sold on somebody like Bernie Moreno being a solid candidate. I don't even know if he's going to get the Trump endorsement. I don't even think he will be the nominee. And there are problems. But now you look at Ohio, and they're going out there and they are attacking Bernie Moreno vehemently for something that he said at a campaign rally, which I think that we're going to share this, and we're going to play this video as well, because this is a little disingenuous. But Bernie Moreno is somebody who hasn't really had a concise political ideology his entire career. He was a never Trumper in 2016, which I know Vance was, but still his conversion didn't really seem all like as genuine. But let's even give him the benefit of the doubt on that. But he was also supporting a lot of liberal policies during Trump's administration, saying, oh, reparations for slavery should be on the table. We need to rectify the racial divide in this country by any means necessary. So he's using policies that are very fringe, typically on the left, and like saying, oh, conservative case for reparations. And he's been murky on other issues like foreign policy, which again, now he's like changing his tune. He's trying to posture himself as that America First candidate in the primary. And I guess I'm open to supporting him, but I would rather have a better option. Warren Davidson needs to run. He is an overperformer. He overperformed Trump in the midterms by like 5 in that district. He's also a die-in-the-wool America First soldier in Congress who is perfect on the issues, great for the state of Ohio, and probably more well-connected. I don't like these outsider types maybe as much as I used to, just because of the fact that you need to know, you need to have experience in politics. And I tell people this, I like outsiders ideally, but I would like to see a lot of people go from rise the ranks in the way that a lot of politicians have in the past. We need solid people running for state legislature. We need them running for local office, state office, like lower level state offices, and then taking their political capital and going up to the next level. Because when we see that, the candidates that take that pathway tend to do a lot better than the candidates that are like, oh, I'm like this type of guy. I'm an outsider. I'm anti, which again, that's good. And these people are good. They say the right things, but they have to also be able to win. And Ohio's Ohio. I think Moreno can win. I would rather have somebody like Davidson get that nomination, though, for sure, if he decides to run, because he may be holding out for 2026. He might want to go for the governorship, whatever. But that's my take on this. There's a lot of question marks about Moreno's past. I don't think he's uneluctable as people say he is. I don't think he would lose to Brown, but he definitely is not really that strong of a candidate, ultimately speaking. And he probably would underperform some like of those statewide officials like Yost or LaRose, who I'm not like fully sold on, but he's a hell of a lot better than Dolan. That's for sure. And would likely win and defeat Brown. But still, here is this clip, because now Moreno is talking reparations again. Very dangerous topic for him. Maybe he's trying to talk about it to bury his old statements on it so they're not talked about. I don't know. But here's what he had to say.
Then it made me think of what were the people that came before us. And we stand on the shoulders of giants, don't we? We stand on the shoulders of people like John Adams and James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and George Washington. That this group of people that took on the largest empire in history and said, no, we will not stand for this, and won. That same group of people later, white people, died to free black people. It's never happened in human history before, but it happened here in America. Let's not talk about the schools very much, is it? They make it sound like America is a racist, broken country. You name a country that did that freed slaves, died to do that. You know, they talk about reparations. What are the reparations for the people from the North who died to save the lives of black people? And I know it's not politically correct to say that, but you know what? We got to stop being politically correct. We got to call it like it is.
So basically this candidate, Bernie Moreno from Ohio, he's going out there and he's saying, you know, the left talks a lot about reparations for black people because of history, whatever, when in reality, like, you could go back and you could say, oh, these people went through hard times as well. These people actually did something good. These people helped free the slaves. Where are their reparations? He's not seriously proposing reparations for like white people or descendants of Union soldiers whatsoever. But like, the bottom line is the attack line on him are saying he's uneluctable because he's like partaking in these cultural issues. Like, how? Like, that doesn't really mean anything. I don't really think that this is the problem. There are problems with Bernie Moreno. I'll even say there are problems with his eluctability, so they say. But the notion that, oh, he's saying something that's like horrendous because he's like, oh, well, you talk about reparations for blacks. A lot of people that say that are, where are the reparations for like Irish Americans who were mistreated, or this group of Americans that were mistreated? Because that's typically how the conversation works when you discuss a topic like this with your average conservative or your just average disaffected white guy in Ohio. So like, oh, well, the same state that voted heavily for Donald Trump, they voted heavily for J.D. Vance, despite the fact that Vance didn't really campaign very much down the stretch and went up against a pretty solid candidate in Tim Ryan, probably the second best candidate they could have run, the other one being Sherrod Brown, and he wins easily. And it's a presidential year, saying, oh, Moreno's going to underperform the nominee by 8 just because of the fact that he said something that a lot of people will listen to the full context and say that they believe it. I mean, you could say, oh, the media is going to spin it. They're going to take it out of context, and they have. And that's disingenuous, and that's going to happen regardless. But it's like, okay, even then he's like floating. He just mentioned the idea as a political device, as a tagline to showcase like the leftist hypocrisy, which is not even like something that's even like that based. Like, it's true. I understand where he's coming from, but at the same time, I'm not going to sit back here and say, oh, well, like this makes him uneluctable. Like, you'd have to kind of be insane to say this in and of itself is the problem. It's like, they're also mad because there's an old tweet of him where he says, I believe life begins at conception. It's like, what? You're mad because he takes a standard Republican position on the issue of abortion? It doesn't work that way. Like, there are arguments against him. There are even arguments against his viability. I do not believe that this is one of them. And if you look at his past, he actually floated reparations for Black Americans because of slavery as a quote unquote conservative Republican. So if anything hurts him in Ohio, it's probably going to be that, actually. It probably would be that, because he's had this past of having some liberal social values to the point where people are just going to be like, okay, well, if they're the same on social issues, I'll vote on economics. Okay, here you go, Sherrod Brown. Here's your second term. It's that. I think if anything, like, this rhetoric is more helpful than his past rhetoric on the issue. But a lot of the the Republican establishment types, a lot of the electabros, the neocons, oh no, they have a problem with this first and foremost, because all they do is sow division and they don't rally behind, because the establishment left will go to extreme lengths to defend legitimate, crazy people and vegetables that are on the left. But the second somebody on the right even says something that your average Republican on the right typically says, like your normie con says consistently, they will utilize ammunition against them. They will attack them. And those attack lines definitely carry over to a general election. And they don't learn the correct lesson from anything, especially the 2022 midterms, because that arguably should be the number one takeaway from them, is that you saw people that were awful candidates in terms of candidate quality, the term that they like to use on the left, go out there and win. Meanwhile, you have people on the right who are throwing people under the bus because they say something that probably a majority of Ohioans would look at and say, oh, okay, he has a point. Like, he has a point. Like, because they think reparations are ridiculous, which they are. Bernie Moreno didn't a couple of years ago, which is a problem. But they see that. And then he's saying they're ridiculous because, oh, well, what about the people that fought to free the slaves? Like, do they get reparations? I don't see a problem with that questioning. I don't see a problem with that tagline. And I'd like for people to tell me where the problem is. You could say, well, the media is going to spin. They're going to spin regardless of anything that any Republican candidate typically says. This is not like he's focusing on some issue that a lot of people just don't care about. He had a throwaway line in a major speech that he gave, and that's what he said. So there are problems with him. I would like Davidson. I'm not sold on Moreno. He is a hell of a lot better than Dolan. That much is true. I mean, it's like not even a contest in that department. So, and it's like, you talk about cultural fits. The states that voted heavily for Obama, or even like by a few points, and then came around at Trump by big margins, were mainly attracted to Donald Trump. They were not attracted to tax cuts or Mitt Romney style Republicanism, because if that was the case, they would have voted for Mitt Romney. In many counties in Ohio, Mitt Romney did even worse than McCain in 2008, who did worse across the board than Bush did in 2004. So you're looking at this and you're like, okay, why is this a big deal again? It's different. He's not running in like Pennsylvania even. He's running in Ohio. And you're going to have to polarize the electorate a little bit to defeat somebody who has been there for so long and has done well among Trump voters even. And you're going to need to peel those voters away first and foremost. So either way, it doesn't matter. This is not even that controversial. What he's saying is absolutely objectively correct. If you're going to be floating reparations, the slippery slope does not stop. And then you're going to have other people. You're going to have people claiming they're 1/16 black trying to get the reparations. You're going to have other groups of minorities, including probably some white people, that are going to be demanding theirs. And this just makes reparations look ridiculous, which, ironically enough, Bernie Moreno used to support them in some capacity, which is something that does need to be noted. I don't think he's really going to be the candidate. Like I said, there are question marks, but this is not one of them. And that's my take on this. So I think we're going to dive into super chats first, and then we're going to go and we're going to get to the the rest of what you guys have to. Well, actually, no, we're going to get the super chats first, and then we're going to get to the rest of the stream. We're going to talk about Trump. We're going to talk about Florida. What is his strategy regarding Florida? What is his strategy regarding trying to prove to people that DeSantis is like an awful governor or something? We're going to get to it. Objectively speaking, we're going to analyze it objectively. See, is this a good thing? Is this not a good thing? We'll talk about it. Christopher Laurie says the electability people say that only candidates who use buzzwords and media talking points can win, but authentic candidates that talk about real issues can't. Exactly. Mark Robinson is somebody who talks about real issues. He's not somebody that goes out there and says, oh, all I'm here for are low taxes and small government and this, that, and the other thing. No, he's talking about issues that families in North Carolina care about. He's not even like engaging in the whole like Trump drama necessarily. He supports Donald Trump. He is an America First conservative, but he's not somebody who makes their entire identity vote for me, I love Trump, and then nothing else. Because there's too many people that do that, And I'm not a fan of those people. In many cases, they don't represent Trump's policies in any way, shape, or form. And they set the Republican Party back. They're the clown car. Mark Robinson is not a part of the clown car. He's not a grifter. He's an authentic conservative. Andrew M. says, can Robinson terraform North Carolina like DeSantis did Florida? Yeah, I mean, North Carolina has a lot of people moving there. Some are liberal, some are conservative. They're taking a lot of people from Michigan, by the way, as well, and Pennsylvania, which arguably is not a net positive for Republicans. But even then, still, it's not like that big of a deal. But yeah, I think he could to an extent. It really depends. He has the state legislature on his side to the point where if he wins, he's going to be able to do a lot. And that's a very, very good thing. And he's skilled politically too, I will say. He is politically skilled. He's able to be controversial at times, but still retain his popularity in a way. Like, I guess you can make the DeSantis comparison because DeSantis has this persona that has been crafted. Oh, he gets things done. He takes on the woke culture in like a swing state and he wins it by 20. Like, that's the brand that he's trying to portray. We could point to his record and say, is he really all that effective here, here, and here? Is he really winning the fight against Disney? Like, we could talk about all that. But I will say he has the outward appearance of partaking in the cultural fight. Same thing with Youngkin. Same thing with Zeldin, who overperformed taking on the crime issue. He didn't talk about, oh, I'm going to cave in on all these liberal issues like Bob Stefanowski, who lost in the state of Connecticut by quite a bit. He's not a pushover. He doesn't alienate parts of the Republican electorate that you need to win. It's true. You can't do that. You can't alienate any part of your coalition. And that goes for any part. You can attack the Republican establishment. Don't come for the voters, though. You're going to need some of those voters. And that's the thing that DeSantis's camp is really doing. They are going hard at Trump's voters. They're saying anybody who, if you support Donald Trump over on DeSantis, you're in a cult, you're a cultist, and that doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. It never has. It never will. And if they're going to be doing that, and that's their tagline, and they're going to be as insufferable as possible, then guess what? You'll look at it and you'll see Ron DeSantis's campaign go up in flames. Because if your messaging is, if you oppose me, you're in a cult, it doesn't work. Because that's all it is. You could point to, we could have a good faith discussion about Trump's record versus DeSantis's record. We can have that discussion. But if you're going to sit back here, act insufferable, have no personality except attacking Donald Trump 24/7 and his supporters, and claim that anybody who supports Trump or defends Trump is in a cult, that's not a winning message. And maybe I shouldn't be giving them this playbook, but I've seen enough insufferable behavior that it's like, okay, they're not going to take my advice anyways, and it's just going to crash and burn at the rate that the campaign is going, given who's really like in charge of the campaign, given who's doing the social media messaging, which he's not running yet, but he's basically running. I mean, the guy is everywhere but Florida right now, and it probably would be doing everybody a solid just to come out and say, yeah, I'm running for president, or even to say, yeah, I'm formally exploring a candidacy, which is like the proper terminology to use when you're like, oh, I'm going to run, but I'm not making it official yet. Because then I think a lot of people would say, oh, he's running for president, instead of like, oh, he's everywhere to be except for Florida when like there's a major flood. Like, that doesn't help you. And that's like the messaging Trump should have, more so than, oh, Florida's like a bad place to live. Because like, it's not a bad place to live. And we'll talk about why, but there are negatives though. Then DeSantis is at fault for some of them. Like, the insurance costs are through the roof, and this is a problem, and it's not really been addressed. And when we're looking at that, it's like, okay, well then, this is a legitimate criticism. But if you're like, oh, well, the state of Florida is like worse to live, because there's so many conservatives that want to move there, to the point where I just don't think, even if some of the economic metrics may be true, like cost of living going up in Tampa, true, but it has to be done effectively to the point where, yeah, I'm doing something other than sharing like MSNBC articles that are like attacking DeSantis from the left. That's the way I view the strategy to be most effective. Let's see, but getting back to super chats, Mr. Jimmy says, will the 2030 census benefit Republicans? California could lose 3 electoral. It possibly could. Vision 667 says, just wanted to say thank you for keeping us in the loop when it comes to politics. Well, thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it. Bad people do exist. Says, hearing you say Robinson could be a front runner in 28 or 32 gave me a heart palpitation. I would run so fast to the polls to get Big Rob in the White House. Exactly. Exactly. Branch Cavidian 19 says, why do you think Vivek didn't run for Senate in Ohio? He seems like he would make a good candidate. Yeah, I mean, he decided to want to become the Republican Andrew Yang for some reason. I don't know if he wants a spot in Trump's cabinet. He wants to do a book tour, whatever the deal is. But I don't know. His campaign's not really going anywhere. He might get a few percent in some of these early states before dropping out. He's probably going to be one of those candidates that does take more away from Trump than DeSantis, which, again, there's not really many candidates that do. And maybe he wants to lay down the groundwork for a future run for higher office. Who knows? He's doing it to get his name up for sure. Sell books, you name it. Matthew Pacheco says, as an Ohioan, I have problems with Bernie Moreno, but would much rather have him than Dolan. He can't even conserve the Cleveland. Yeah, exactly. Couldn't conserve the Cleveland Indians name. It's true. I mean, like, that's like the baseline. Like, oh, like we're going to bend over to the left, political correctness, saying you can't have this mascot for this team. You can't do that. And it's like, seriously, like that's like the only thing that's the bare minimum, is just not do anything and just to say, no, you're wrong. And of course they might say, well, X percentage of Native Americans support the name being Indians, which is true. Like the Redskins name, they've done polls. It's like 90% are not offended. It's an AstroTurf campaign, mainly by white liberals. And then you have some fringe like Native activists as well. But it's like, come on, seriously. You're going to bend over for political correctness and change history for the sake of political correctness. It's not how it works. We are tired of political correctness destroying our culture, destroying our society. And if you're going to be an effective conservative leader, especially of a state that uniquely was a Trump-specific state in many ways, and he was the one that moved the state to the right, you're going to have to be a fighter. More so than not, and just maybe not even just do anything or touch anything. Like seriously, you don't even have to lift a finger to not cave into political correctness. Like seriously, nobody even really, a lot of those people didn't even know who Matt Dolan likely was when they were like attacking the Indians' name anyways. So whatever, doesn't matter. All right, that's it for Super Chats for now. If you guys want to send in Super Chats, feel free. We're going to be going on to another segment, but when that segment is over, feel free to send in more Super Chats, and we'll read them when the time comes. But that's it for Super Chats. Let's talk about Florida, because Donald Trump was an epic troll, as he usually is. He's very good at trolling. He does a little bit of trolling. And he got the endorsements of a majority of the Florida congressmen and women. And that's huge, because that's DeSantis's home state. That's his home turf. He's had very close ties and friendships to a lot of these people. And they're going out there and they are choosing Donald Trump over him for 2024 in the state of Florida. This is not like the state of Ohio or Kentucky or West Virginia or like Alabama, where Trump uniquely like has that grip on the Republican Party, the primary voters. This is Florida. If DeSantis cannot win the Florida primary, he is not winning in 2024. Like there is no shot. This should be one of his easiest primaries to win because that's his home state. And I know Trump, it's his home state too, but DeSantis just got off a major like electoral victory there. He's passing all this legislation. And if he goes out there and he just like bombs in the Florida primary or can't even get the endorsements on his side, it kind of showcases that he's not really that likable. And yes, a lot of the Florida congressmen are on the MAGA side. They are more America first. You have people like Matt Gaetz, who's really, obviously, people see him as a top fighter, a Trump defender, very good on foreign policy, a lot of other issues, et cetera, you name it. Then you have people like Corey Mills. He's been better than expected. I opposed him in the primary mainly just because Sabatini was seen as so much better, but he has been solid so far. I don't really have any complaints with him. Then you have Anna Paulina Luna, who I didn't really trust in the past, given some of like her stances 5-10 years ago, but she's been perfectly rock solid so far. And there's plenty of other representatives. Like the only pushover that we see is probably somebody in Florida like Jimenez or Salazar hasn't endorsed, but Jimenez is somebody who went out there and he endorsed Trump, which again, that's like the only like red flag endorsement that we see. Maybe somebody like Kat Kamek. I don't even know if she's endorsed Trump yet, but she's fairly weak, one could say. But when it comes down to it, we know that Donald Trump has that stranglehold on the Florida Republican Party in the primary, to the point where even though a lot of those people typically probably like both of them, they are siding with Trump over him, which is very telling. And obviously, the representatives who endorse you do not determine the outcome of the primary. It's the voters that decide. But you look at polls, this last couple polls that have come out of Florida, they have Trump up in the Florida primary. If he's winning in Florida, he's not losing. There's no way. He's going to win Iowa. He's going to win New Hampshire, possibly South Carolina, especially with the two South Carolina Republicans in the mix. It's true one or both of them may drop out. And then you go to Nevada, which is a state that Trump probably also wins. I don't know by what margin. Depends on if everybody drops out or not. And it also depends, is he on message? What is the attack line? Because if he's going out there and he's just like not resonating with the average voter and what would diminish DeSantis in their eyes, and he's like making himself look worse, then he would probably lose support. But as of right now, if he's on message the way that he's been in like a lot of his videos, if he returns to social media, controls the narrative, you name it, then he probably is going to win the primary with ease. And I think a lot of people know this by now. And that is why a lot of people, even in Florida, are endorsing Trump. They're supporting Trump. DeSantis has one endorsement in Florida. She's not like the worst congresswoman ever, but she's not like super based either. And he has people like Chip Roy, who is solid on the issues and then like cries over Liz Cheney losing her position of power. And then you have Massey from Kentucky, which is probably his most solid endorsement because a lot of people in the base like Massey. And I think a lot of that just stems from him being super fiscally conservative. He's not really that much of a populist. There are some issues that he's very good on, but he's very like libertarian in other ways, you name it. But that's interesting. And then you have people like Lance Gooden who go to the DeSantis meetings, leave, and then endorse Trump and says, oh, I like DeSantis. I have a positive meeting with DeSantis, but I've decided to endorse Trump. And that, I think, does kind of explain how a lot of voters feel. No, you would not be correct to say your average Republican voter like was reviled by DeSantis and views him to be an awful governor, just like you would also be wrong to say that your average Republican primary voter views Trump as somebody who's like past his prime, can't do anything right, is irredeemable, can't win. Like your average Republican voter likes both of them, but they probably like Trump more. And if they see DeSantis running, like, yeah, they may be open to supporting him if he does everything correctly and Trump goes out there and like somehow makes a fool of himself. But even then they have to like pick it apart everything that Trump does to find things wrong. And even then the attack lines don't hit, especially because they use a lot of these old GOP talking points from 2015 and 2016 that didn't work, still don't work, and will never work. And then they use resist lib taglines and talking points, and they don't work either. So you're looking at this and how many representatives is Trump getting on his side? Then they'll be like, oh, well, Trump is the establishment, which obviously most of the endorsements Trump has got from Congress are not establishment endorsements. I would say that DeSantis is probably 2 for 3 in terms of like the more establishment side of things. Even though Chip Roy is solid, I still consider him to be a defender of the GOP establishment because of the whole Liz Cheney debacle and how he cucks at very inopportune times. Yeah, solid voting record. I say like he's okay in the middle, whatever. But then you look at Trump's record and his endorsements. You have Andy Biggs, Paul Gosar, Matt Gaetz, Anna Paulina Luna, Corey Mills, some of your Florida endorsements there that are solid. And there's just plenty more. DeSantis has the endorsements of the Rooney family, and a lot of those guys are rhinos who were prominent representatives in Florida. Now they are going out there. They are vocally supporting Ron DeSantis. And I think you look at the fact that, oh, Trump might have like 1 or 2 here and there, like Jimenez, who's basically doing a back scratching favor because Trump endorsed him in his victory in 2020. And like, okay, well, maybe that's why DeSantis really did nothing for the Rooneys. But the Rooneys who are like dyed-in-the-wool establishment Republicans, they're going out there and they're supporting DeSantis. So it's interesting. So Trump gets all these people together for a dinner and he epically trolls the DeSantis camp. He goes out there, he trolls them. He basically does this optics thing, which you have to do. It is a photo op, but at the same time, photo ops matter. And just because something's a photo op doesn't necessarily make it disingenuous, because he got all the endorsements. He has a major dinner with all these Florida people. And it's like, oh, well, look at me. Look at me. I got all these people together. And it's like, that's a sign of a good campaign, because now he's actually attacking DeSantis where it hurts, because he can't even get all the people on board in his own home state's congressional delegation. He only gets one of them. There's like, what, 20, 24 somewhere in there Republicans. And now Trump has endorsements from over half of them. Some haven't endorsed him, probably will when he jumps in terms of DeSantis. I agree. Like, he'll get a lot of endorsements. And the more establishment conservatives like Romney, if Romney doesn't like endorse Haley or somebody even like worse than Haley, like a lot of those types, they'll either stay out of it because they probably know DeSantis doesn't have a shot, or they will line up behind Ron DeSantis. It's one of those two things, and we'll see what happens when the time comes. But Trump is definitely flexing his muscle. Now we get to the other side of the Trump Florida debacle, because now he's going out there and he's attacking the state, and he puts out all these new attacks on Ron DeSantis. He's saying Florida is not doing well as a state, which, again, one could say is a little bit not like really 100% in tune with what the base thinks, because the email claimed that Florida was among the worst states to live, to work, to raise a family, to retire. And I don't think that attack line sticks. And some people might be mad at me for saying it, but I don't believe it sticks. And there are legitimate criticisms of Florida, some which Donald Trump did highlight. He's right about the fuel shortage. 47% of fuel stations in Miami and Fort Lauderdale are empty. And DeSantis is out there campaigning across the country. Now, that's a problem. That is a problem. And one could say that is a problem on the shoulders of Ron DeSantis. And if Trump uses that as an attack line, that will stick. Also, the cost of insurance is going up through the roof significantly. Car insurance, home insurance, whatever insurance, you name it. And DeSantis is governor there. He's overseeing this. Is it 100% like, oh, it's 100% his fault? Well, maybe not, but you still attack the person for things that are happening under their watch if they're not focusing on them. And that is a legitimate attack line, especially given the fact that Trump has been bearing the blame for a lot of different things that a lot of people on DeSantis's camp that his staff is paying. They're attacking him. They're making up all these lies. They're sowing division on the right wing. And he's going to have to hit back. And if he hits back a little disingenuously, like, I'm not going to care about it that much. I will say, I don't think it's a good thing to say it's the worst state to live, like, or to attack DeSantis for opposing Disney. You could say he's like losing the war with them. You could say it's not amounting to anything. Disney's as woke as they've ever been. It's performative. Like, yeah, that is passable. And that might increase Trump support. But saying Florida's like the worst state to live in general, throwing out all these statistics, it's like, not exactly. Like, it's not the worst in education or all this other stuff. Like, that's all arbitrary. Florida's doing okay, but there are problems. And just because Florida is doing well, it's not always because of Ron DeSantis. Economically speaking, it was doing well financially under Rick Scott. Definitely the change in leadership coupled with the New York Democrats imploding. You have a lot more conservatives that are moving from the Northeast to Florida, Michigan to Florida, Wisconsin to Florida, you name it. But still, the state's not like the worst state ever, but there are legitimate criticisms. And I think Trump needs to be careful about how he navigates this, because you need to maximize the base. You don't want the base who likes both, because most people like both, to sit there and scratch their heads and say, okay, well, now he's just being disingenuous. So that's what it comes down to. But also hit back at DeSantis for being disingenuous and the people under him for being disingenuous on their attacks on Trump. It's going to be an ugly primary at this rate, which is something I'm not happy about. Doesn't improve our odds for 2024 whatsoever. But the more endorsements Trump racks up early, the better his messaging is, the better his odds will be to just clear the field early on. And by the end of Super Tuesday, he could sit back and say, I'm the presumptive nominee. And I think DeSantis deep down does know that. And I don't think he knows what he's getting into if he does decide to jump in soon, which I'm pretty sure he will, because it's like, okay, you could wait till 2028. You could have it all. Trump even hinted that he'd like consider him for VP, or was considering him before this whole debacle, before he took the donor's bait to draft him to run against Trump to sow division and to delegitimize Trump, his chances in the primary and the general as well, because they're completely fine with Biden winning so long as Trump gets out of the way forever, which again, who knows if he actually will. If that's the case, it's going to be brutal regardless, but he didn't have to jump in, or he doesn't like have to do this, because 2028, they'll say he's irrelevant and it's better for him to jump in now. And like, if he had a chance, I would agree, but it's not like the biggest difference ever, because DeSantis is somebody who will be governor until early 2027. The day he leaves Tallahassee, he can go to Iowa and announce his run. He's not going to lose a ton of relevancy at that point. And you would be honestly disingenuous to imply that he would lose relevancy if he waited until 2028, or he would lose a ridiculous amount, or he wouldn't be the front runner, because he's not the front runner now. He's losing by 30 points. Like, if anything, I'm trying to help him when I say, don't do this. Don't do this. And a lot of people aren't going to trust him because he's taking the bait. It's not because they're in a cult or anything like that. It's because Trump's fine for the most part. And DeSantis jumping in is going to make everything worse for a lot of people. And I think that we know that. And there's a lot of GOP resources that you will be wasting on the primary that will not be able to be used in the general election to create a turnout operation, to create a team that will harvest ballots, to, you take Scott Pressler and you make thousands of him the way that Democrats have thousands of Scott Presslers. Like, we have Scott Pressler and they have like thousands of staffers that go state to state and do this. We don't have that operation. That's why we're losing first and foremost. It's not even, oh, our candidates are too far right or they're crazy, because the left-wing crazies are winning all the time. Your average moderate Democrat 10 years ago would be seen as crazy and having crazy beliefs, which they do. So you have to analyze this, look at the big picture and say, okay, well, we need to actually allocate our resources properly. Resources are finite. Money is finite, especially in the Republican Party. And you're going to have to find a way to go out there and allocate them properly if you want to win. And having somebody like DeSantis jumping in, he's getting a lot of donor money that otherwise could go to helping Republicans even down ballot in a general election in 2024. And I don't think it's the best move. I don't think that we're out of line by saying it's the best move. Trump in 2020 did not really run that good of a campaign. He's arguably running a better campaign now than he was running then, and he's not even using social media. And even then, he was, 43,000 votes away, bearing anything else, from a second term. And that was with an economic downturn. That was with the whole COVID nonsense debacle. You had riots in the streets. He was fence sitting on him. Didn't work out to his advantage. Thank you, Jared, who's now out of the picture. And it's like, okay. And you look at the approval polls and the favorability polls of Trump, it's like, oh, well, 1-6 doomed him. Like, nobody cares about 1-6, dude. Like, even Trump in the midterms as a factor, like, it was not what Democrats were fired up about at all. Like, they were fired up at times about the Roe v. Wade getting overturned. That's true. That was a factor. I don't think it was enough to explain the disaster. But Trump being a factor, he was not. He didn't even campaign very much down the stretch. If anything, him getting involved more may have actually helped boost turnout in a place like Wisconsin or Pennsylvania, where the base stayed home if you look at the rural county map. And I will die on that hill because it's true. And that's that. So, all right, super chats. We'll look at them. We have more super chats here. Going to get to the people. If you guys have any more super chats, feel free to send them in. Nairolamda says, what do you think of the Biden whistleblower? Are Republicans making enough noise about this? Seems impeachable if there was White House involvement. Well, let's see. What is this exactly? Oh, the Hunter Biden thing. Yeah, I saw what happened there. And this is something that just kind of gets lost in the media. We don't really hear a lot about it. And I think it does kind of shed light on the whole corruption issue side of thing. And it is a problem to an extent. Some people will say your average voter doesn't care about Hunter. And I don't think you should run a single issue campaign about Hunter Biden. But the fact that Biden knew about these business dealings and they were siphoning money away and giving his son a cushy job that he didn't know how to do anything at the job, wasn't a real job. He was using it to siphon all this money from Ukraine. And the fact that the media covered it up and big tech companies covered it up. And now we have the Twitter files that prove that it was all covered up. It's like, I do believe this is something that should be touched on from time to time. And then you look at the polls about it. I don't think he'd ever get impeached. No president's getting impeached, ever. Mainly because of the fact that we're too polarized and it would take a ridiculous amount of defections on the Democrat side to convict. Now, he might get impeached in Congress. That could happen, but impeachment doesn't really help your party. And it didn't help Democrats when they impeached Trump. And I don't know if it's going to help Republicans if they impeach Biden. It depends on how egregious it would be. I don't know if this is as egregious. I think it would take a lot more than this to get a public opinion for impeaching Biden up high enough. Matthew Pacheco says, who should we try to primary in 24? Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney needs to go. And there are other Congress people. Nancy Mace, for example, needs to go. And there are many other people. And you will also see some of these like I wouldn't say rhino types, like run-of-the-mill people who could be primaried. They would back Trump in a primary just to avoid a primary challenger. I think that might explain some of Trump's more establishmentarian endorsements he's getting, even though there's not that many of them. But like if Michael Guest goes out there and he endorses Donald Trump, it's pretty evident that he's just trying to get that endorsement in return, which it'd be pretty epic if Trump would just say, no, you can endorse me. I'm still going to endorse a challenger, but he didn't even do that in 2022. So it is what it is. Rodney Benfield says DeSantis has the high ground, but no one has done better than Noam. If she runs, I will devote every ounce of resources I have to that effort. Trump is too gullible, weakest of them all. Well, I think that if anyone's gullible, it would be believing that Noam is actually a solid governor. Because, and there's a lot of subject matter there, but she's vetoed a lot of bills because her donors did not want her to pass them through. She only did it when she was getting a primary challenger in terms of the whole transgender and sports bill. That, for example. But also, like the COVID stuff, that's like her strong point. She wanted to lock down. The state legislature said no. And then she was like, okay. And then she tried to primary a lot of those America First state representatives with her own back challengers in 2022. And it failed in many cases, which is good. But Noam being like this good governor, like, no, again, it's a public relations thing more so than not. And yeah, I think DeSantis is a better governor than Noam, actually. Noam is just somebody who's very weak on plenty of issues. She was weak in Congress too when it came to foreign policy, all the main issues in Congress. She was very weak, and electorally speaking, very weak as well. Like 2010 red wave year, she would like barely win in South Dakota statewide for their, at-large congressional district, and had a very mediocre voting record in Congress. So no, absolutely not. Not a Noam fan. You might say she did this okay, or she did that okay. Like maybe she's good on guns. It's like, okay, South Dakota. I mean, any governor you get in South Dakota could probably do the same thing. Nara Namald says Dems full blast scandals where Republicans blow them off. Seems A.G. Garland prevented prosecution of Hunter and Biden influence peddling. Well, this needs to be talked about. If you are Trump, if you are running for president, you have to hammer it home. When Hillary Clinton was Trump's opponent, he attacked her on the scandals and it did work. And when he attacked Biden on Hunter, his polling numbers did better. I think it was just his messaging down the stretch was better, just wasn't enough to overcome a lot of different things. But 2024 already needs to run for the general. Trump needs to spend more time focusing on the general election right now. And the more he does that, people are going to say, oh, he's the guy against Biden. He's already running for the general. Your opponent's only polling at 20%. He could step down time to time and look, oh, look, you're down there. You're down there. You're down there, meatball Ron. But no, actually, unironically, it's like true. that you got to go out and you got to compare and contrast your administration with Biden's if you're Trump. And he's doing that at a lot of his rallies too, which is good. He's doing that a lot. But I don't know. Noah may actually end up being the VP, which I'm not happy about. And I don't think, I mean, the VP is a figurehead. The VP does tend to matter less than people think it does when it comes to policy. But I mean, when it comes to somebody like Noam being VP, is it like the end of the world? Maybe South Dakota gets a better governor. But then you look at it and it's like, well, if she tried to get all of the people to her right primaried out, what's not to say that she's going to get in Trump's ear and say primary out all of these like Freedom Caucus types who are really solid on the issues, but maybe like to his right on some things. I don't know. So I don't think it's a good idea. But yeah, she is better than Nikki Haley. I think that a paper bag is better than Nikki Haley, honestly. R. Watkinski says, do you think Trump should announce his VP pick early before the season starts? No, I think you should pick it when the primaries are over, obviously, before the convention. I don't know. But these are important questions. These are all important questions that need to be discussed and they need to be talked about. Because a lot of people are being disingenuous about 2024, mainly on that side. They're not exactly telling the truth about the way that this election is going to unfold. They're trying to posture it as, oh, this guy, all he does is whine about the 2020 election. All he does is attack Ron DeSantis. He does a lot of things, if we're going to be completely honest. And there are things that need to be emphasized more than others. And if you watch Trump's rallies and his messaging at his rallies, he's doing a pretty decent job overall so far. He's going to be in Iowa a lot. He's going to be doing all kinds of rallies in Iowa, talking to a lot of people. He's going to have to go through that process again. And if he does so effectively, that's a good thing. And that's the complete, correct, nuanced take on it. And it's funny. And now let's say DeSantis hypothetically gets the nomination. Let's say he gets it somehow, or Trump somehow implodes, he gets the nomination. And let's say Ron DeSantis goes out there and loses. What will the narrative be at that point? They probably would still find a way to blame Trump, or they would say DeSantis was too Trump aligned to win. That's going to be up next. But that's not going to happen, so we're not going to have to worry about it. But, I mean, there are problems with DeSantis that don't get talked about. Just because you do very well in a gubernatorial race doesn't mean you're going to do well nationwide. Mitt Romney outperforming Bob Dole in Massachusetts, or outperforming Bush, I guess you would say, by like 28 points in 2002, was it the year that he ran and won? Didn't translate nationally at all. When you saw John McCain win by 51 in 2004, that didn't translate well nationwide. Florida is a unique state, but you're talking about a statewide election. Yes, it's a little disingenuous to say, well, Trump won the state by more because he got more votes overall, because, yeah, DeSantis did run in a midterm year, but technically it's right because turnout was lower overall. Like, yeah, he outspent his opponent like over $90 million. He spent over $100 million on that race that should have been spent elsewhere. His opponent didn't even tried to throw the election with some of his decisions, picking a lieutenant governor candidate who was like pro-Castro, among other things. And yeah, he won that by 20, but at the same time, Trump did end up getting more votes. You couldn't even turn out more voters than Trump got, to the point where it's like, oh, well, this guy's actually like building a transformative coalition that defies the midterm trends, which again, that's nitpicking. But what I'm saying is it is a midterm year. Nationally, he's not winning Florida by 20. He could win it by 10, especially the way that Florida is trending. I think Trump is going to win Florida by more than he won it by as well in 2020, where he won it by like 3 and change. He'd probably win it by like 7. DeSantis might win it by 10. But federal elections are vastly different than statewide elections, where you have popular incumbent governors running their campaigns. Gretchen Whitmer is not going to win Michigan by 11 points if she's actually maybe, because the Michigan Republican Party is just that bad. But I don't think she would win it by 11. She might win it by like 4 or 5. But you talk about national politics being different. Depends who the candidate is. If Republicans put up somebody awful, then maybe. But still, Like, you have to look at the big picture when it comes down to these. So we're going to get to other chats. Feel free to still send in super chats. We'll go for another 5 to 10 minutes or so. We'll see what you guys have to say, and then we will head out. So let's see, because I want to get some people involved as well. We're going to be doing call-in streams in May. Hopefully get a couple of those out of the way. So we haven't forgotten about that either. If Trump is so strong in the Rust Belt, why did he? Well, I mean, if you think that Trump still having states like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania trend right in 2020 compared to the national environment is a bad sign, wait until you put up Ron DeSantis and see what happens, because we know Trump can win Wisconsin with trends. Biden's popularity's dipped. He can win Pennsylvania with trends. Can DeSantis win Wisconsin? I think if he's going to pick off any of those three, I'll say Trump's not going to win Michigan, neither will Ron. I think that Trump has a better shot in Pennsylvania, where he has ties to those white working class voters. DeSantis, somebody who's been wishy-washy on energy, even trade, wishy-washy on that. But you look at Wisconsin, their Republican Party tends to be more competent. Like, yeah, I think DeSantis, if everything goes right, he can beat Biden through Wisconsin. But that's not guaranteed. Trump on the ballot in Wisconsin, given trends, even with their recent blunders in the gubernatorial race or the Supreme Court race where Trump did not get involved. Yeah, I think Trump was the favorite, at least narrowly, in Wisconsin for 2024. I will say that. So any other narrative does tend to borderline on concern trolling. That part is true. Let's see. As bad as the economy can get, Biden still president. Well, I mean, that part is actually true to an extent, that he is always going to be in this fight. There's no landslide in 2024. People are just going to have to accept it. Republicans can win, possibly by 50 to 60 electoral votes if everything goes right. But this is still going to be a very, very close election. Democrats are not winning Texas, probably not taking North Carolina. Republicans, on the other hand, they're not going to pick off Minnesota. They're not going to pick off Michigan, New Mexico, Virginia, New Hampshire, Maine, whatever. This is going to be there's very few states that can flip either way, whether it's going to be Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, maybe North Carolina can be thrown in there, but I would probably say that it stays in Republican hands. And then, yeah, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Michigan is kind of like the inverse of North Carolina. So that's what it comes down to. Trump is polling well against Biden. He's like winning the popular vote in RCP, which again, it's early. And so is DeSantis to an extent. So I'm not going to sit back here and say, oh, well, these early polls are everything, or that polls are accurate, because even though nationally they were in 2022, statewide polling was a total disaster. And maybe it's because Trump's base didn't turn out as much as the polls accounted for. They're like, oh, well, you bomb with independents. Okay, to an extent. But is it really that these independents are like that malleable? Or is it that right-leaning independents just didn't turn out? It's mainly the latter, because you don't know how to navigate the electoral system. You don't know how to get things done. You don't know how to actually win an election with the new post-COVID system. It's more that than anything. DeSantis did that in Florida, although Republicans have been doing it in Florida longer than him, so I wouldn't say it's only his fault, but who knows? Trump said he was the father of the jab. Well, the thing about that is his policy on it is identical to DeSantis's policy. They are both pro-jab and anti-mandate. That is their policy. DeSantis touted the jab 1,600 times. Trump touted it quite a bit at his rallies until he got booed, and then doesn't tout it anymore for the most part. So it's like, yeah, that's not really the best argument, in my opinion, the whole COVID thing. Like, does DeSantis outflank him optically on the issue? Absolutely. I don't think people would deny that. But still, let's not bury the fact that they literally had the same issues. And then Trump was praising Florida for reopening when they did. Obviously, when it came to Georgia early on, he did criticize Georgia. He praised Florida for reopening. He praised DeSantis. Now he's backtracking and saying they had bad COVID numbers, which again, like I said, I don't think that that's like going to help him, but it is what it is. This is a campaign where a lot of things are going to be thrown around and said that people probably aren't going to mean when the primaries are over, but it is what it is. Grant Mandel says thoughts on Tulsi as VP. She made a great speech and proved herself with a Christian conservative audience in Iowa this weekend. I don't know. I mean, Gabbard is somebody who I wouldn't mind in the cabinet. She has good foreign policy, but as VP, I don't know if that fully resonates, because even like the more grassroots America First side of things thinks that she's like a grifter. They think she's a part of the WEF. And then you have like the normie cons who say she's a socialist. She was a Bernie socialist 2 years ago. So I do think that she probably was more of a grifter when she was on the left, because she had to be socially liberal to get elected in Hawaii. Now I think economically she's throwing a bone to some more of the right-leaning people economically. But it's like, I don't know. I don't know much about Tulsi to say she'd be a solid VP. Although what it would do is pit her and Kamala, assuming Biden's the nominee, against each other on a debate stage again, and Kamala would just get utterly trashed and destroyed. So, I mean, he has that, but I don't know if she really grows the coalition a whole lot. And if anything, there's probably more like conservative establishment boomer types who probably would be turned off by it. But I don't know. I wouldn't mind her in the cabinet. I wouldn't. She has good foreign policy. That's another thing. A lot of people don't care about the whole 2020 COVID stuff. Just like people will say on the DeSantis side, well, Trump needs to stop talking about 2020. Well, all their arguments about COVID are also from 2020, because like that's when it happened. 2020, 2021, the jab rollout was early 2021. And yes, Trump did take credit for it and shield it way more than he should have. And he gets criticism for that. But let's not pretend that DeSantis didn't criticize it either. But he did take a more skilled approach to it, to the point where he was able to posture himself as this like COVID hawk, mandate hawk warrior, which he was on the mandates, more outspoken. But Trump doesn't support the mandates either. He even said at a rally that I was at last year, the last time he mentioned it at a rally, he was booed. But then he said, but you know what? We have to move on. We have to oppose the mandates, etc. Then he was just resoundingly met with applause. Because I think Trump is more receptive to the base than a lot of people are. And I'll even say that DeSantis is more so than other Republican politicians, which is why he's polling above 10%. But still, it's like, yeah, I mean, if this is going to be the narrative, 2 years ago, you had the same position on this that I had. If anything, it would just push Trump to the right on the issue, which is still net positive. And then like, that's it. But like, yeah, if he's going to say, if Trump's going to go out there and say DeSantis reopened too early and the jabs are awesome, like then they'd actually have a mandate there. And like the whole sharing the COVID numbers article from MSNBC, I didn't vibe with that, for the record. I didn't think that was a good thing. And it's not going to help him if he does that, but it's not like that's going to be the nail in the coffin either. So, all right, this will be the last call for super chats. We're going to end the stream pretty shortly here, but if you guys have any more super chats, feel free to send them in. It's been a good stream so far. Peaked at around 450 live viewers or so. So that's good. Let's see. Boomer's only voted for DeWine because he had an R next to his name. That's part of it. I mean, I would say that he got a lot of votes from liberals because the Dems didn't put up anyone of note, and they liked DeWine because DeWine was a COVID cuck. And as a result, it paid off for him among those voters, because that was kind of like his olive branch to them as an incumbent governor. He was able to win over those voters. So, yeah. Let's see. I wish Don Jr. Yeah, Don Jr. after the recent events, I'm not gonna say he's all that much of a fighter. Oh, you can't boycott this company because they happen to support Republicans. It's like, no. If that's the case, then you should be more inclined, because then they'd listen to a boycott, more likely than not. I voted for DeWine because Whaley was so bad, but I almost left it blank. Wouldn't have showed up if it wasn't for Vance. Yeah, and I mean, Vance had base issues too. I'm not going to pretend like he didn't. I mean, he was a never Trumper. He was liberal on a few issues a few years ago. And he changed his mind. His, conversion was a little bit more genuine than a lot of other people's, faked conversions like Josh Mandel's. And it's like, yeah, I think that if Vance was going up against like a weaker candidate, he would have won by more. Or if the base liked him a little bit more, he didn't have that divisive primary, he would have won by more. But now he's proving himself very well, and I think he's a 2028 contender. Imagine Robinson Vance, a Robinson Vance ticket, or the inverse, probably Robinson Vance. I mean, I'm just seeing that ad, man. Robinson he's a dog. He's a legend. It's not even just like the two genders clip or we got to teach our kids how to read and not teach them how to go to hell tagline that he used, which was pretty funny. And that's another thing. Like, the guy can go to the black churches and he could do the two genders thing. And then he could go to the factory workers and talk about how he was left off because of NAFTA and then all these other things. He can go to these other groups. He could throw red meat at even the teachers here and there, which he did in the ad, which was interesting because Republicans typically don't do that. They shy away from that sort of thing. But I mean, DeSantis leaned into it, and it definitely helped him gain some popularity during his presidency, unlike somebody like Matt Bevin in Kentucky, who just said, no, screw them. So, I mean, you have to be careful. We don't like teachers' unions, but if you're talking about pay, if you're talking about increasing pay, if people are doing their job and they're not getting paid enough as other states or whatever, it's like, yeah, then that's fair game. But yeah, Matt Bevin, he was not like a diehard America first on the issues either. And he was not eluctable because people just saw him as kind of an ass because of how he just navigated the political arena. Benson X says, in the event China invades Taiwan, how should the U.S. handle it? Well, the Taiwan argument is different than the Russia-Ukraine argument. And a lot of that is because they control a lot of our computer chips. And my question to that, and I say this as somebody who would believe that China invading Taiwan's a bad thing, but why do we cede all that ground? Why don't we make the chips here? Why don't we move to make the chips here? So it would be a disaster. I don't want war with China. I don't. I would ideally like to stop having China take advantage of us, but I don't want war with them. I don't want war with anybody if it's not necessary. And I think having Trump in there would be a very big pro-Trump argument, because you're talking about World War III here. This isn't, oh, Blump said something mean about Governor DeSantis or whatever. This is World War III. And Trump is somebody who has been known to be his own man on foreign policy, peace through strength, whatever. It's his strongest arguably suit, his strongest quality, best foreign policy this nation's seen in decades, if that, if not even longer. So I would say that we need somebody who will de-escalate the conflict. I don't want war. And I also want to start actually making chips here, which, I mean, Trump on the Nelk podcast, he talked about this, and that was a good thing. So let's see. Sam Madsen says, will Dan Kildee ever lose? Maybe. I think it depends. I think if you have Trump on the ballot, if he runs a strong campaign, but I mean, the Michigan Republican Party, they don't have a bench and they're just so weak. So I don't know. Trump said it was his decision to lock down. Well, he said that when the lockdowns had 70% approval, which they never should have had that approval rating. But people are saying, you said this in 2020, or you said this in 2020. It's like there was a point in time where pretty much everybody was scared and they were supporting these lockdowns, which was the wrong thing to do. But even DeSantis closed down his state. South Dakota didn't, which again, South Dakota is not as population dense. And yeah, Noam, it's not Noam's fault, or it's not Noam's success that they didn't lock down because she wanted to, but the state legislature didn't. And that's true. So in terms of the lockdowns, they were bad. I don't support them. Nobody should support them. But I'm not going to sit back here and say, well, this is disqualifying when you look at the COVID policies of Trump and DeSantis. And it's like, okay, well then, interesting. So, Mr. Jimmy, thank you for the 2. Trump, did he start knocking? Yeah, Trump did knock DeSantis, and he started in October. But that is true. I don't know how that's either here nor there. DeSantis is, well, nobody's saying DeSantis is obliged to endorse Trump. I'm not making the loyalty argument, but I will say that a lot of people will look at him as being somebody whose political career was made by Donald Trump. So for him to run and kind of like try to cross him and one up him while still trying to like pass himself off as like the more measured version of Trump, who's like actually been pretty measured outside of Truth Social rants, is probably not a winning strategy for DeSantis. And I just say that objectively, not even like in a way that's malicious to DeSantis. All of the attack lines on Trump from the DeSantis camp, for the most part, are falling flat. And his troll farm is not helping him, and they're just being insufferable. And that's the way I see it. So, all right, this will be the final call. We'll go for one more minute. If anybody has any super chats, this will be the last call. But other than that, I think we're going to end it. It's 10:30 here in Texas. It's 11:30 on the East Coast. We've gone on for quite some time, and that is it. So let's see. Mr. Jimmy says, thoughts on Mr. Beast firing and exclude. I didn't hear about that. That's news to me. If that's true, then maybe he listened to the fans, I guess, on that issue. Because if he actually did fire him, which I don't know about, but if he actually did that, interesting. Like I said, this is somebody who used to make the attack helicopter jokes. He used to be edgy back in 2016. And then he also had like a developing pornography addiction to like weird anime simulated pornography of very young individuals, which is disgusting stuff. And then on top of that, he leaves his family to play dress up basically. And then he like gets the support of a lot of people. And it's like, no, this is not something that should be like looked upon with something positive, in a positive light. And we know how YouTube gets about, and just a lot of these big tech platforms get about that kind of stuff. And like Matt Walsh, for example, even though he's with the Daily Wire, he's like kind of like a normie con in many aspects. Yes, he's better than Shapiro, but he still like has some bad takes from time to time, mainly on the Trump stuff. And now he is like getting pushed out. They're going to like demonetize him because he happens to attack the alphabet community. He's very, very solid when it comes to the whole debunking the whole transgender narratives. Now they're trying to push him out of the public square. So they're trying to push him to Rumble, which is why everyone should go follow me on Rumble. Maybe we'll do more Rumble exclusives. I don't know. Talk about this kind of stuff a little bit more, because this is very important. And it is a winning issue because everybody deep down knows that there's something off about this, but you're not allowed to talk about it in the public square. So yeah, now you're just being censored. You're not allowed to discuss it because they want to push the Overton window further. It's going to be something else next. It was the gay stuff initially. Then it was the transgender stuff. What's next? What is next? There will be something next. And we're already seeing that to an extent. Even back in the day, they were like, oh, you can be transgender, but there's only 2, and now there's unlimited, and then it's going to go to something else. And the road that it's going down does lead to children, which is extremely disturbing. Extremely disturbing. Like when DeSantis, which again, see people that say you don't say anything, that's not true, because he passed a bill, he signed a bill that was very hard on like sex offenders that offended on children and like increase the punishment for them. And then the alphabet community was up in arms. This is attacking us. This is genocide, this, that, and the other thing. And it's like very telling how you're equating that to that. Just interesting. I'll leave it at that. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching the stream. Like the stream down below. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell if you haven't hit the bell. I'll see you guys in the next one. Red Eagle out.